about change management and the future IT. And a large part of that has really come on the back of my experience over both several years, but definitely over probably the course of this year, which I think we can all agree has been interesting, to say the least. A little bit about my background before I go into what I've observed and some of the data that I've seen, and perhaps some advice I would give to IT leaders in the time ahead. A little bit about myself. One is I've basically been moving from being an operator over the last 20 years into basically becoming a partner at a leading venture firm called Ridge Ventures. We invest in late seed and Series A enterprise companies, and we back companies like Crux and Fastly over the several years. And I joined recently to be able to help trying to find the next generation of software companies which are going to be disrupting their respective industries. Prior to that, I was CIO and I would say interim CISO in 5 companies. And I think a large part of that role allowed me to look at managing IT operations and business applications and infrastructure and data and security. And what I discovered in that was I partnered with a number of corporate functions. And as a lot of CIOs typically tend to do, we tend to basically be very intellectually curious about how to basically make sure you can deliver good productivity and efficiency across a number of these departments by selecting the right applications, being able to take in a lot of the processes and how they can be re-engineered, and think about how we can basically inject more data in terms of how we basically make decisions. In addition to that, I've been very lucky to work with some amazing teams. And that has helped me to be able to be, I guess, a people mentor and also a leader of multiple teams and helping guide them in the time ahead. Probably the most importantly as part of that, I've always been the very first CIO of many companies. As I like to joke, I actually don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, but I've actually been brought into situations when probably companies have got to a certain size or scale or have got to levels of complexity and have tried to basically figure out what the road ahead looks like. And in some of those situations, I've been able to help and be part of a collective executive team in a public offering, such as Pure Storage. In others, it's being able to help figure out scale. And in a lot of those situations, I've really worked with a lot of startups and a lot of companies to be able to figure out how to innovate internally within the IT function, and then to be able to use those solutions and deploy them across entire organizations. I've also been very, very lucky in being able to pick Smartsheet as a solution that I used for collaboration and project management and tracking and process engineering, all of those times. And candidly speaking, it's been exceptionally beneficial to me, both in my career and being able to organize my team. So I thank you to the leadership team of Smartsheet to be able to invite me to talk about how I view IT change management in the time ahead. So I think I should basically start off and take a little bit of a pause, maybe a deep breath, and take some observations and learning moments from the last 7 months. Look, I think it's fair to say it's been interesting, to say the least. The world has slightly been upside down. In our generation, we probably haven't faced a situation like we did over the last 7 months. And I think it's important to recognize that a lot of us weren't prepared for it. A lot of us have seen this for the very first time at the scale that we have. And second of all, I think it brought in a number of teaching moments for many of us, whether it is in IT or marketing or at the executive suite or in our local government or otherwise. And I think that's important to be able to put in place that we really have been in this together. And I think our experiences have either made us stronger, but definitely has taught us a lot more about how we can be more effective in our work as well as in our lives. And I think the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we think that companies were prepared? My easy answer to that is, I don't think the majority were. And I think that what that basically meant is that people understood that they had built business continuity plan and disaster recovery plans and be able to walk through these scenarios, but they weren't really tested. They were audited to a certain extent in certain scenarios because you've had to do that, but they weren't really tested to its full extent. And what we basically saw, and I thought probably the core observation, was there was technology-led the reaction and transformation of companies over the last 7 months. Yes, we saw, and I will talk a little bit more about that, yes, we saw a growth in collaboration, but fundamentally we saw the use of technology being deployed to be able to change the product, to be able to look at customer experience, to be able to bring operational efficiency across the company. And I think that was the biggest teaching moment for all of us. I think there's been an acceptance, whether you're a small business or otherwise, to be able to accept the fact that technology was a key part of being able to resolve issues, keep your businesses afloat, and being able to operate as a team at a large scale. I think the second part to that and the foundation to it was collaboration. I'm not going to talk about how all of these solutions were a big part of that story, but I think we recognize that collaboration was not just about the solution. It was also about the quality. It was about how we're able to communicate and talk to each other, how we're able to work together collectively as a team and as an organization, and probably most importantly, how we're able to engage, not just with our customers and our partners, but internally within our teams. And so collaboration was probably a key part of the last 7 months, and it probably brought in a number of other derivatives in how we thought about how we operate as a team. I think the other teaching moment fundamentally was the fact that conversations about the workforce amplified. I think there was an aspect of really thinking about what is the right way for us to be able to operate, what is the right way for us to be able to engage internally. Could we be conscious of one's time and their family situation? Could we be, really be thoughtful about what is the stage of our company? We saw this very clearly over the last 7 months when companies have accepted that remote working is the standard. And irrespective of what the outlook is in terms of the current situation, companies have accepted this. What does that basically mean? It means that the workforce has fundamentally been refactored. But it also means that because work is such a big part of who we are as individuals, and it takes and consumes so much of our lives, that actually we have to think about what the overall impact of that is in terms of not just the tools, but think about how you get enabled and mentored. Think about how you're able to collaborate with other team members. Think about how you connect with the executive suite, which you're not able to do in the past. Think about how you're able to learn from people outside of your organization. Think about the people and the culture. And those conversations probably much more amplified than they were before in the past. And I think that was combined with kind of what's happening in the world and in each of our communities on a pretty regular basis. So I think that the ultimate thing that came to me was we are fundamentally in this together. If we think about each company and each industry, it is fundamentally being more technology driven than ever before. We talked about this notion of the last couple of years that every company is becoming a technology company. What did that actually mean? Well, I don't think there's any time like now that gives you that answer, that we've adopted more technology than before, we've built more technology than before, we've probably bought more technology than before, and I think more importantly, we're probably more enabled to be able to embrace technology and the change that it brings to companies than ever before. And I think probably more importantly to that, it has really impacted all of our lives. This image is one of millions that came about where businesses, whether it's a yoga instructor or a dance instructor or otherwise, in our daily lives has basically been driven by technology and leading solutions like Zoom. Well, I think it's important to think about the research that basically we're seeing is that shifting from work into email and virtual conferencing and other team collaboration tools won't make up for the productivity losses that many have already experienced. And as Chris says, they may actually introduce more friction to employees' day-to-day work. And that fundamentally means that we, as IT leaders, need to really think about what our role is as we go into this. And I think if you look at all of the data that's come through, it's important to think about the fact that 47% of the survey respondents agree that the pandemic revealed major gaps in the technology strategy. We need to understand that the world is a pretty big place, and that technology adoption, there is latency in how that base typically works. If you think about where companies adopt cloud and the way that's been accelerated over time, it's not because people have hesitation. Well, and large people have, but they're actually really trying to figure out what value it drives. And so as a result of that latency in decision-making and adoption, in some cases, it's not being critical in any way, shape, or form, people have very specific use cases. People have very specific requirements. And sometimes the solutions are not ready to be able to understand those industries or those particular verticals. And so as a result, a number of solutions that we have in place are probably not ready, number one, and in other cases, we don't have those solutions to move forward. In other cases, one of the biggest concerns comes in the fact that security threats and technology at scale are still at top of mind. Why is that? Well, it's a very, very good example. It's because right now, I'm probably speaking to you from my home. I may have a nice corporate sign in my office at home, but if you think about it, we've probably gone from being in an office in a company which may be, say, 2,000 employees spread across 40 offices, and that company is now in 2,000 offices. The security paradigm has fundamentally changed. And that fundamentally means that now you don't really have a corporate network per se from an infrastructure standpoint. And so therefore the security paradigm and the threat vectors, whilst still being largely the same, will still evolve and become more complex. And if you think about new existing technologies, that also applies when you think about from a security vantage. You know, what's probably important is that we talk about whether companies were prepared. And 53% say current IT systems are not equipped to handle post-COVID policies. Well, it's very interesting to say that, and probably the purpose for me to kind of a little bit of a call to action to all of us as IT leaders and IT operators to think about. You know, if you think about this as a little bit of a reset in the workplace, that's fundamentally what's happened. And we typically know what reset buttons typically work with. I know I've attached that to a number of IT support tickets that I looked at when I was a CIO. Make sure you switch it off and then switch it back on again. Hopefully it typically works. Well, probably not as simple as I would basically put it. But if you think about that in the workplace, fundamentally the office and the work environment has had to be refactored in a COVID situation. And we need to think about what our role is from an IT leader standpoint about what we change. And I think fundamentally this is a huge opportunity for IT leaders, IT managers, VPs of IT, and those who are in business systems and applications to be able to really make things happen. Let me talk to you a little bit why. If we think about where the world is heading towards right now and how companies and offices have had to be refactored, the future of companies and how IT teams can make things happen is actually really, really exciting in some cases. I actually think it's a huge opportunity for all of us as IT leaders, VPs of IT, directors, managers, and owners of business application systems to really be able to step it up and to be able to provide impact to each of our companies. And I think that opportunity is real. Here's my fundamental viewpoint on what IT teams need to do. Number one, engage better, organize faster, and partner well. I think we've now reached a stage where we have to make faster decisions, number one. We have to be able to engage better by understanding the impact of software, of impact of cloud, and being able to understand the requirements and understanding where departments and what their strategies look like by being able to engage better with them. And I think we need to partner much better than we've done before. I've heard a lot from CIOs that I speak with and IT directors that I connect with on a regular basis, that the ability for them to be able to collaborate and communicate internally has always been something of question, that it has not been something that they've been optimal at. This is that time now that we all need to be able to make sure that we can engage better with our compatriots, that we can organize better within ourselves as a team, and that we're able to partner well both with the executive team and other members of the organization. Productivity has to be about output and not tools. What I mean by that is we've taken a stance over the last few years by being able to basically buy solutions by looking at a specific problem. We really haven't thought about the actual output that's gone into it. If I think about Smartsheet itself, I've been a multi-time customer of Smartsheet. I haven't looked at it as a reference point solution. I've looked at it as something that has driven great output in the companies that I've worked with. If I've deployed out a product within an organization, if I'm looking at doing change management, if I'm looking to re-engineer a process, fundamentally, I'm not focused on being able to make sure that that process or the solution is being deployed. I want to make sure that there's measurable output that comes out of that. I think for too long, a lot of us have been able to choose solutions, but we haven't been focused on the output. And so therefore, my first call to action to a lot of my IT friends, brothers and sisters, is that we need to focus on the output, not on the tools. Second, I think we need to have a much bigger focus on enablement. I think enablement has been about understanding tools, but we really haven't focused on understanding people, the growth and the success aspect that we can all do much better if we're able to basically much better enable. What do I mean by that? Well, fundamentally, if we understand that we're buying more solutions before, if we're adopting more solutions before, we actually have to get into a place of not just supporting them as IT leaders, but being able to actually get success from them. That also basically means that within each of our functions, we probably have to spend much more time getting up to speed on some of the skills. I think one of the things that CIOs and IT directors and IT leaders have not done over the past is to focus on people's growth and development. It requires us to be thoughtful about understanding how we retain our teams, number one, and number two, how they're able to develop and grow. And not enough tools and solutions have been focused on this. So we should be spending more time trying to think about the up-leveling and upskilling of individuals. If you think about people in the workforce right now, I mentioned a point about our place in the workforce and conversations have been amplified. That has fundamentally mean that people have thought about what is their role and how do they grow. They think about their lives in a way that this is a major part of how they think, and it consumes who they are. They want to know that they're coming to work every single day, that they are developing over time. And so I would really ask all of our IT leaders to be able to focus on, to be able to figure out solutions on people's growth and development. Security is everyone's problem. Now, earlier when I talked about my introduction, I said the fact that, I basically held an interim CISO role in a couple of the roles that I basically held as a CIO. Why did I do that? Well, it's a very, very good reason. It's because I fundamentally believe security is everyone's problem. We are now at a stage where talent acquisition, enablement, and education in the InfoSec and cyber world is exceptionally hard. What we need to be able to solve this, we actually need to focus on being able to get more people educated on cybersecurity. This is not just about being able to run trial phishing campaigns and being able to run more security awareness campaigns. It's about up-leveling our own teams within IT to be able to up-level themselves on the security stack. They need to have absorption and understanding of the security tools. They need to understand security frameworks, and they need to be able to make sure that they look at solutions when they bring them into place, that they are secure by their very nature. And if they're not, what are we doing to be able to secure them? If you think about the obligations we typically have when it comes to data privacy and security and compliance, these are material when it comes to our company's finances. And if we're not able to basically make sure that our data strategy, our security strategy in that light are in good shape, we're going to basically suffer. And it's going to come down to us. Lastly, all it takes is one click. And so we probably have to get better. This is not about basically, scare tactics or otherwise. This is about making sure that we as IT teams, as I spoke earlier, organizing better, engaging more, and partnering better, partner much more within the company, with employees and colleagues to be able to make sure that they understand the ownership that they have around security in the company. People development is an asset, not a cost. I spoke about this earlier when it comes to enablement. That was really much more about being able to up-level yourself from a skill standpoint, being able to understand the migration to cloud technologies, being able to understand more SaaS solutions, being able to get more knowledge on, say, security when you haven't before. That's about enablement. But people's development is probably something that a lot of IT teams are really, really asking for. And they've been badly served, unfortunately, in the conversations that I've had. And so whether that means us partnering up much more with HR organizations, whether it's us asking ourselves the questions that we basically need, also being able to figure out our own development, that opportunity exists right now. And I don't think it's impossible to be able to solve this problem. If you think about this, there's probably more content, more learning and education available out there right now than ever has been before. So our ability to enable is actually very, very possible. Our ability to develop is not. What is the path people need to take if you are a system administrator? What is the path that you need to take if you're an IT director? It doesn't necessarily mean that that IT director wants to be a CIO or a VP of IT in some cases. So we've really got to be able to take a little bit more thought about how we're able to develop our individuals, what are the frameworks that we need to look at, and what are the steps that we need to be able to actually build people's careers on. This is important not just for our own selves in terms of our ability to mentor and grow people and develop our own skills as leaders, but also that's a responsibility we have for each of our teams. Talent acquisition in technology is exceptionally hard. You create retention by being able to have people who are in a great environment, they feel that they are growing individually as from a learning standpoint, and that they're growing individually as people as well. That's the way that you basically do it, and that's how I did it as a CIO. If we move and think about the role of technology and what that impact is, my biggest call to action is that we need to think about automation in an intelligent way. That fundamentally, we've looked at automation to be able to fix a problem, but we actually need to look at automation from an intelligence angle that will transform entire processes, in some cases entirely eradicate them, and in other cases being able to transform our entire function. We have to have automation at the absolute core of our operating strategy. Why do we say that right now than we've probably done before? You'll probably say, well, I've developed up these scripts and I've worked with these bots and I've been able to look at these integrators in the past. You probably have, but it's still very, very early innings. And the reason for that is very simple. The compute power is now available for us to be able to actually apply to our operations. The data sets are there for us to be able to learn and to be able to design algorithms and to be able to work with companies. And more importantly, we're probably, if we engage and probably partner better, we're able to have a much more level of depth in understanding processes that run our company. And so when we think about automation, it needs to be intelligent and needs to be driven to be able to have a really transcending impact in our companies. Lastly, I really want to think about the fact that leadership is now foundational. We do not have enough leadership development happening in companies from my vantage point. If I speak to CIOs and VPs of IT and IT leaders and CTOs otherwise, there is a massive need for us to think about how we're able to develop more leaders in our company. This is not something that can be done overnight. In some cases, there's lots of us who don't wish to be leaders, which is also fine. My call to action is a very simple one. This is the opportunity to do it. And it's a very simple reason. Because technology is now driving these more than it's ever before. If you are a technical leader, you have got more knowledge than a lot of your colleagues. You've got the ability to be able to embrace this change, take the technology, and be able to help drive some of this and lead by example. At the very, very least, you should be able to lead from the front if you are able to own a solution and drive it to its full deployment and output. And so that just may well be a system deployment from a leadership standpoint, but it's leadership nonetheless, because you're driving change in a company. When you think about leadership within the actual function of IT, that's required for you to be able to develop people. That's able to grow, to be able to actually create followership. And lastly, if you're a leader in an executive function, your objective is to be able to drive leadership for other functions to follow because you're able to harness technology probably better than most of your colleagues and peers. Lastly, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I look forward to connecting with a lot of you in the future. My last comment is really a very simple one. If there's any time for us to be able to take technology on board and to be able to really deploy it to its full benefit, to be able to really disrupt an industry, to really be able to have an impact on a company, that time is now. A tremendous amount of the last 7 months that the world has kind of gone a little bit upside down. But if there's any opportunity that we take those moments, we take a little bit of a step back, take a deep breath, and to be able to understand what lays ahead of us, I don't think there's a better opportunity now than ever before for us to be able to make that impact. Thank you.